There was a time when all of humanity spoke a single language and lived in unity. But one mistake changed everything. Do you know how languages and nations came to be? This story not only explains how it happened, but also reveals something essential about God's purpose for us. After the great flood that transformed the earth, people began to reorganize. United by a single language, they shared not only words but also dreams and ambitions. Among these desires grew the idea of something grand, something that would demonstrate to the world, and perhaps even to God, the strength humanity could achieve when united. It was in the land of Shinar, a vast and fertile plain, that this idea began to take form, to build a tower so tall it would touch the heavens. The vision of the tower was audacious. It would not be just a monument but a symbol of independence, a declaration from a people who no longer wanted to depend on an invisible God for protection or prosperity. "Let us make a name for ourselves," they said to one another, certain that this achievement would make them eternal. Every word carried a mix of pride and fear of being scattered once again, of losing the strength their unity provided. They believed that by staying together and accomplishing something so grand, they could control their destiny. The project soon began. The technology of the time was simple yet ingenious. They decided to mold bricks instead of using stones, a revolutionary innovation for the era. These bricks were made of clay hardened by fire and bound together with bitumen, a sticky substance that made them durable and waterproof. Each day the work progressed. The sound of hammers, the crackling flames in the kilns, and the hum of determined voices filled the air. Each brick laid on the tower seemed like a step closer to becoming like gods. But something unseen was growing alongside the tower. Pride. What started as a demonstration of unity began to transform into a celebration of human glory. Little by little, people forgot the true Creator, the one who had spared humanity through Noah. Now, they focused solely on what their own hands could build, and in their hearts, the idea grew that perhaps they no longer needed God. Meanwhile, the landscape of Shinar changed. The tower could be seen for miles, a visible testament to human determination. Passers-by were both impressed and uneasy. Some wondered, was it right to try to reach the heavens? Wasn't it God himself who had placed the rainbow as a sign of his covenant? But such thoughts were quickly silenced by the group's enthusiasm and pressure. Who would dare question such a grand project? However, there was something they could not foresee. God's watchful eyes were upon them. He saw every brick, every effort, every intention hidden in their hearts. God did not fear the tower itself, for there was nothing humanity could build that could rival his power. But he knew that this act was not merely about a tower. It was about humanity's desire to distance itself from his presence and establish a path that would lead to self-destruction. And so, as the tower grew, so did God's decision to intervene. The story of the Tower of Babel begins as a celebration of human power but carries an important lesson. There are limits humanity cannot cross without consequences. God gave us the ability to create and achieve great things, but always with the understanding that we are his children, dependent on his grace and guidance. When we ignore this, our pride can lead us to unexpected and painful falls. As the voices of the workers echoed high above the tower, a question lingered in the air, though no one dared to ask it aloud. How far can we go before something stops us? And so, as the next brick was laid, the sky seemed ever closer, and the moment of divine intervention ever more inevitable. The work on the tower progressed at an intense pace. Men and women dedicated their strength to the project, driven by the dream of touching the heavens and engraving their names in eternity. The construction was an impressive demonstration of unity. Everyone spoke the same language, which allowed them to coordinate their efforts with an almost supernatural precision. There were no misunderstandings, and every command was promptly followed. The synergy was so great that it seemed impossible for any obstacle to hinder the progress of such a colossal endeavor. The tower grew in spiraling layers, a daring architectural feat for its time. Inclined ramps wound around the structure, enabling workers to ascend with blocks of bricks and containers of bitumen. The heat from the kilns used to harden the bricks was nearly unbearable, yet no one complained. The project was not just a building. It was a symbol, an obsession. Looking upward and seeing the top of the tower vanish into the clouds brought a mixture of pride and awe. After all, they were achieving something that had never been done before. Every detail of the construction was carefully thought out. The project's leaders, charismatic and authoritative figures, guided the people with fiery speeches. They exalted the grandeur of what they were creating and reminded everyone that the tower would ensure their place in history. It was impossible not to feel part of something greater. This sense of belonging and purpose united the people, dispelling doubts and fears that might have arisen. However, even as the unity seemed perfect, a shadow was growing within their hearts. Some began to compete for recognition. Which team could work faster? Who could lay the most bricks? Who would be remembered as the greatest contributor? The collective glory gradually gave way to individual ambition. Each layer of the tower, higher than the last, reflected not only the unity of the people but also the vanity growing within them. God observed the construction attentively. He saw how humanity, created to reflect his image, was now striving to become independent of him. The tower, which began as a project of unity, was transforming into a monument to human pride. The power of unity, meant to be used for good, was being channeled toward selfish ends. The Creator knew that if he allowed them to continue, humanity would drift even further from his presence. But God also knew that humanity, still so young in its history, had much to learn about limits and dependence on the divine. Meanwhile, the workers on the ground marveled at the progress. The tower could already be seen from miles away, a sight that made even the most skeptical believe there was nothing they couldn't accomplish. Many believed that if they remained united, there would be no barrier they couldn't overcome. Unity was their greatest strength, but also their greatest danger. What would happen if ambition blinded them completely? Who could stop a humanity that no longer recognized its limits? Among them was an old man who watched the construction with a concerned gaze. He was one of the few who still remembered the stories passed down by his ancestors about the flood. He wondered whether this tower was truly a sign of progress or merely a harbinger of something greater, something no one could yet foresee. But his words were drowned out by the general enthusiasm. Who would listen to an old man at a time when everyone was obsessed with the future? The tower continued to grow, its contours seemingly reaching the horizon. Humanity believed it was becoming invincible. Yet above them, something moved in the unseen. God watched with love but also with concern. He knew that the unity of the people was a powerful weapon, but he also knew that the human heart, inclined toward pride, could turn this strength into destruction. Unity is a precious gift that can achieve incredible feats. But when it is not aligned with God's purposes, it becomes a dangerous weapon. How often in our lives do we unite with people or projects for the wrong reasons? God invites us to use our collective strength to build something that glorifies Him and blesses others, not to feed our ego or vanity. True strength lies in working with humility and purpose. And so, as the leaders commanded the workers to lay more bricks and move even faster, something began to change. The clouds above seemed to stir, as if the heavens knew what was coming. The question was no longer whether the tower would be completed, but how much time remained before humanity faced the consequences of its ambition. As the days passed, the tower continued to rise. It was no longer just an imposing structure, but a living symbol of human power. Workers looked upward, marveling at how much they had already achieved. With each new layer, their enthusiasm grew. Some even began to imagine that, once completed, they could truly reach the heavens and establish themselves as equals to the angels. In the hearts of many, a dangerous question began to take root. Why do we need God if we can achieve so much on our own? This thought spread like wildfire through the bricks that formed the base of the tower. The structure, which had started as a symbol of unity and protection, was now becoming a monument to human pride. The project was no longer a quest for safety but a declaration of independence. The voices that once praised the glory of God now proclaimed, "Look at what our hands can do. We are powerful. We are invincible." The leaders, always positioned at the top of the structure, commanded with an almost religious fervor. They promised that the tower would mark the beginning of a new era. "With this work, we will make our name eternal," they said, and the crowds, captivated, applauded them. Few stopped to question the cost of such ambition. Workers were pushed to their limits, and the doubts of those who hesitated were quickly silenced. No one wanted to seem weak or opposed to the project. After all, who would dare stand against the greatest achievement of humanity? But something felt off in the atmosphere. As bricks were stacked and the bitumen hardened, people began to feel an emptiness that the leaders' grand words could not fill. Despite all the praise and progress, an unease was growing in their hearts. Perhaps it was the absence of true purpose, or perhaps it was the subtle reminder that they were defying the heavens. Yet these doubts were drowned out by the constant pounding of hammers and the collective enthusiasm. No one dared to stop. High above, where the tower seemed to touch the clouds, the winds grew stronger. Some workers hesitated, glancing down and feeling the weight of the height and the magnitude of what they were building. But the leaders pressed on. "Higher! We cannot stop now," they shouted. Each word seemed to ignite an even greater desire to surpass their limits. But were those limits there for a reason? God, in His wisdom, was watching. He didn't only see the bricks and the tower rising toward the heavens. He saw the heart of every person involved. He saw the spark of pride beginning to burn like an uncontrollable fire. God knew that human pride, when taken to its extreme, could lead to destruction. He didn't want to destroy the people. He wanted to save them from themselves. That night, the skies were clear, but there was tension in the air. The workers rested, exhausted, while the leaders continued to discuss the next steps. The tower was almost complete, and they were determined to finish it quickly. They did not realize that, above them, something was about to happen. Something that would change the course of their lives forever. Often, we are tempted to believe that our achievements are solely the result of our own effort and abilities, forgetting that everything we have and do is permitted by God. Pride is like a shadow that grows with the light of success, but it is crucial to remember that only God is the true author of all things. When we act without humility and gratitude, we distance ourselves from Him and risk losing the true purpose of our lives. As the moon illuminated the unfinished tower, a strong wind began to blow. What seemed like a mere nighttime breeze carried with it an omen, something none of them could foresee. The sound of the wind mingled with the night's silence, setting the stage for an event that would change everything. It was a new day in Shinar. The sun rose over the horizon, reflecting off each carefully placed brick, as if the tower itself sought to shine in defiance of the heavens. The workers, still weary, resumed their frantic pace. Orders echoed across the construction site, and the sound of hammers and shovels filled the air. For them, it was just another day of progress, but in the heavens above, something had already been decided. God had been patiently observing humanity's efforts, but it was not the physical structure that concerned Him. He knew the hearts of the people and understood that the real danger lay in what was growing within them. arrogance, and the desire to live without dependence on him. And so, in his wisdom and love for humanity, he decided to act. But his intervention would not be destructive. It would be a powerful reminder, an act that would not only halt the project, but also teach an eternal lesson. At that moment, the workers began to notice something strange. As they climbed the ramps of the tower, carrying bricks and bitumen, an inexplicable confusion began to take hold. A leader shouted orders, but the workers who were supposed to follow them stared back in confusion. Some murmured among themselves, trying to decipher one another's words, but it was futile. In the blink of an eye, the single language they had shared was gone. At first, many thought it was just a temporary misunderstanding. But the confusion spread like wildfire. People who had worked side by side for months could no longer communicate. A bricklayer would ask for bricks but receive the wrong tools. A supervisor tried to explain the next step, but his workers only stared at him with puzzled expressions. Chaos was complete. The voices that once worked in harmony now turned into a cacophony of unfamiliar sounds. Languages no one recognized emerged, each with its own melody and tone. What began as frustration quickly turned to despair. The tower, which was meant to be humanity's greatest achievement, became a stage for uncontrollable turmoil. From above, the leaders tried to restore order, but their words were just as ineffective. What once seemed like a perfectly coordinated effort was now a scene of confusion and quarrels. One group began accusing another of sabotage, and distrust grew among those who had been allies until that moment. The unity that had built the tower unraveled in a matter of moments. God did not need force or destruction to halt the project. He simply confused their languages, reminding them that true communication and true strength come from him. The work, which seemed so close to completion, was abandoned. Unable to continue, the workers began to scatter across the earth. The crowds that had once been united under a single purpose now split into smaller groups, each with its own language and culture. The Valley of Shinar, once filled with the sounds of progress and enthusiasm, now stood silent. The unfinished tower remained as a testament to what could have been. At the same time, it served as a symbol of human limitation, a reminder that no effort, no matter how grand, can succeed without God's blessing. It is a reminder that true unity comes from God. When we forget Him and try to live by our own strength, we create division and chaos. God did not confuse the languages to punish, but to teach that only in His presence can we find harmony. It is an invitation to reflect. Where is our heart? Are we pursuing our own paths or allowing Him to guide our steps? And as the people left the valley, each group heading in a different direction, the tower remained as a shadow on the horizon. It was now an echo of the pride that nearly led humanity to ruin. But God was already looking to the future, to the steps humanity would take in search of redemption. A new story was about to be written, a story of reconnection and reconciliation, far beyond the ruins of Babel. Time passed, and the marks left by the Tower of Babel became a distant memory. The grand construction, which once symbolized human ambition, was now just a pile of ruins worn away by wind and rain. Yet the lesson God taught in that moment was never forgotten. Even though people were scattered across the corners of the earth, their cultures, languages, and stories still carried fragments of that event. Babel was not the end of a project. It was the beginning of something greater. Scattered, men and women created new paths. The dispersion, which seemed like a punishment, became the foundation for the diversity the world knows today. Every language, every nation, every culture began there, on the edges of the Valley of Shinar. Though different, they all shared the same origin, and this became a testament to divine wisdom. God did not destroy humanity. He divided it to protect it from itself, offering a new opportunity to return to him with humility. Looking at this story through today's eyes, we see that the Tower of Babel is not just an ancient account. It is a mirror of who we are. How often do we try to build our own towers? How often, driven by pride, do we think we can reach the heavens on our own? And how often does God intervene, separating us from our plans and redirecting us to something far greater than we could imagine? However, the story of Babel also points to something even more magnificent: the reconnection that came centuries later. On the day of Pentecost, the apostles, filled with the Holy Spirit, spoke in many languages, and all the people understood them. It was as if God was showing that the dispersion of Babel was being reconciled. The same God who divided the languages that day, in his wisdom, was now uniting hearts. The unity lost in pride was restored through humility and grace. This final message is the true legacy of Babel. We are stronger, wiser, and more complete when we unite under God's leadership. We don't need to build towers to reach heaven because he has already come down to us. His presence is accessible, his grace is sufficient, and his love is infinite. All we need is to recognize that without him, our efforts are empty. The story of Babel teaches us that our greatest strength does not lie in our ability to build, but in our humility to recognize that God is the foundation of everything we do. When we align our plans with his divine purpose, we find not only success but also peace. The tower fell, but the opportunity to be rebuilt in God remains ever open. If the story spoke to you, leave a comment sharing what touched your heart the most. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any of the incredible stories we bring here. And most importantly, share this message with someone who needs to remember that God is in control, even when our plans seem to fall apart. Together, let's spread hope and wisdom. May you all stay with God and with the wisdom of the Word.